Hello, everyone. Darlene, hi. And Rebecca, hi.
Michael.
Ondona, hi. So let's explore Beyond Being Human and its spiritual mission. It all first arose with an angelic encounter I was blessed with several years ago. Intense, profound, and has changed my life. So it's grown from a simple idea of an educational documentary on our multidimensional nature to include various other online publishing expressions such as this, with discussions and conversations. To start with, let's look at the spectrum of dimensional beings, seen and unseen, impacting our daily work-life reality. Beings such as angels, extraterrestrials, advanced civilizations is another way of putting that. The Fae realm, fairies, elementals, supernatural and paranormal entities, possibly even Sasquatch. And I'm sure many people have lots of varying degrees of whether that's real or not. But as this group and many others that we talk with know, there's so many people experiencing so many different things. And the second part of our discussion today will actually talk about how it can affect relationships. And we've started an impact study building trust and tolerance in our multidimensional world. I'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. Just to start off with, Darlene, would you like to say a bit about your experiences?
That my mother, father, and brother were all experiencers in one way. Bit different than my experience. They had a lot more fear involved, and I think I didn't have that. The beings that I'm in touch with, there was 3 of them that followed me around for quite a few years, probably somewhere between 5 and 8 years before I really got to know them. And there were 3 of them. They would come in at night. They would either be at a window or by my bedside, and I'd roll over and just feel comforted by it. Like, oh, okay, you're here. There was no conversation. There was no anything. And then my first introduction was actually to a reptilian. And that was an incarnation that I had, one of my first ones. And that was early 90, it was 1990 when that entity or that energy came in. And I started channeling him for a few years. It was a group that got together that was really part of his timeline. And we moved through what was needed to be healed in that group. There was, I think, 8 people that were in that group at the time. And then there was more information coming. He started to work with me in the working with clients. And then he introduced me to the Council of 12, which was actually 3 seats that were empty, so that in the council room, there was this place that I would go, and in the council room, there would be this large white luminescent table, and they would be around it. It was a teaching facility. There would be 3 empty chairs of whoever beings wanted to come and participate at that level. So I got a chance to meet a lot of different types of, or species, or I don't like to call them ETs, multidimensional beings I feel very comfortable with. They're very good teachers. What they did for me personally is in my first 25 years with them is that they moved me through my past lives. They moved me into being more heart-based. They moved trauma out of me. They did that. They would work on me at night. They would talk to me at night. I'd write at night. I would do a lot of visualizations and it was like my personal journey with them. And then about 2 years ago, with all that, because I was teaching groups at the time, I have a couple groups that are still running. And about 2 years ago, because I completed the second draft of 5 books that have to do with their timelines and how they intersect with ancient history and what, where was the planet and what was happening in the Earth as a refugee planet, actually in the experimental place. That they decided that, okay, since I reached a level, they could move on. So now I work with them and other multidimensional beings, and they're called the Evolves. Before it was a council of 28, and now they're called the Evolves. So they're part of that, and we work in not the council room anymore. We work in the white space, which is a space of neutrality and co-creativity. And the groups that I work, so what happens in there, I bring them in, I go into that space, and they work with the group as a whole in clearing and cleansing timelines, and then they work individually with each person, giving them an assignment for the next month for them to take a look at for their own healing.
Wow. Yeah. It's amazing. The diversity that's out there is just absolutely incredible. And maybe Ondona, would you like to add to that? What are some of your experiences?
My experience didn't start out as galactic. My experience started out very much rooted in the 3D plane. And so I came into the world very much open, but not having anyone who I could speak with to necessarily validate that. And so I would say initially it was being in communication with those who had passed, those deceased relatives. So they really the ancestral plane. And eventually getting to a point in my life having done all the things that I was supposed to do, right? Those things that we are kind of conditioned to do. I lived that lifestyle, got married, had kids, and eventually got to a point in my life where I realized it was time to step into myself, my truth, because I have lived in accordance to doing what everybody else wanted me to do. So having decided to step into that space, then everything began to really open up. I connected with the group, kind of got some confidence in speaking and sharing my truth and hearing the truth of others. And really it came in listening to the stories of others that I had allowed myself to then connect with the larger aspects of myself. And then having gone into that space, connecting with that group and decided it was time to own me. Well, then I kind of stepped into the galactic space. Then the galactic started to open up for myself. And so I now understand in hindsight that I've done this many lifetimes, gotten to a certain point, but not gone over the edge. This lifetime, I allowed myself to step over that bridge and step into the new, what we have been intending to do many lifetimes. I'm now getting to that space where I'm ready to do what it is that I came into physicality to do, anchor the frequencies that I've come into this physical plane to anchor. And so having opened up fully, I won't say that I've connected to any one group. I've connected to many groups. There's not just one line of frequency that I've stepped into awareness of or that I channel. I'm connected to all of it and I'm fully embodied and aware of myself as a multidimensional being connected to and with all of it. So bringing all of it through into this physical plane. The way that Darlene mentioned seeing physical beings or connecting with physical beings, they don't flesh themselves out for me in that way. I see beings, I connect with them frequency wise, or I connect with them as light. And I've always asked because I've always had a desire to see, see with my physical eyes. At least my human aspect thinks it wants to connect with them and see them physically. But they've always said, you've always trusted. So that wasn't a necessity for you. You never needed to see in order to trust. And so that was just a part of how things flesh themselves out for me. But I'm fully connected to all of I would say the ones that are most widely known to most of us, the Arcturians, Pleiadians, the Syrians, and all of those who are very close to us. But then there are others who are we don't have a human name for, because, scientists haven't come into an awareness of those groups yet, right? But they are still very much out there, and I'm still very much connected with them. And so what I found is that as I get an inclination for a group that's kind of stepping to the forefront, it's not necessarily to say that your source is that group. It's just that that's the particular energy that's being activated within myself in a particular moment, bringing that aspect of self into alignment with that particular energy. Because on a base level, in truth, we're all of it, right? we're connected to all aspects of the energy. And so as those pieces of us come online, we kind of have a greater awareness to that particular group. So we may have a propensity toward one group or another group. At least that's how I perceive it from my own perspective. But yeah, very much working with all of those groups. And so in my day to day, kind of what I do is I am literally just the open conduit. And so I connect with those planes from the space of the heart. I get connected with the heart, because in the heart, you are connected to all of it. In the heart, or resonating from the heart, there's no fear, there are no threats. And so you put yourself in resonance with that which is in alignment with the Christ consciousness. And so I allow myself to operate on that particular plane. And so I bring through what's necessary for any one person in any given dynamic. So I don't necessarily say, well, this is what I do, this is what I do, this is what I do. It's kind of dependent on the person with whom I'm working with in a particular moment, because it's unique. It's unique as the individuals that you meet. And so really I open myself up and deliver what is necessary within a given moment. So that's kind of the way I perceive the energies, and the way that I've kind of come into awareness of those energies. And the last thing I'll say is that I believe it's, as we open up to these energies, what really happens is that we allow ourselves to resonate in alignment with the fullest, most authentic essence of us. And as we do that, we allow more of that true essence of us to become embodied in this physical plane. And that's what's seeking to be expressed. Ultimately, we're whittling away the illusory self, which is tied to the identity, and allowing the full essence of us to be embodied within physicality, and to move and live and breathe and spark change within the physical. And that in itself, that divine essence of us, is the thing that shifts the people that come in contact with our frequency. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. The light language that you do and we publish on Beyond Being Human platform, if I could be so bold as to not right now, but at the end, maybe do just a minute or two of light language. Would you like to do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Absolutely.
And Rebecca.
Oh, thank you, and Don and Darlene. I resonated with so much that both of you said. My experiences began in childhood. My earliest conscious memory was around age 3, which is pretty common for experiencers. Unlike Darlene, I really didn't have anybody in my family that was aware of it, but I did live in a very small town in West Virginia. It was a coal mining town, Clarksburg, West Virginia. And it was mostly settled by Irish Celtic people and Scotch Irish people. And as a very young child, I was working interdimensionally. I didn't really consciously know what I was doing. Matter of fact, I didn't really know what I was doing until I was probably in my 40s. But I would be pulled under the ground, and the ground there was very porous. So I would go under the ground and be with these beings, some of whom were reptilians, some of whom were just beings that had a different form. I was never frightened. I also, living in that little small town, there was a lot of freedom. So I could be outside. I could be running around. I could be disappeared and no one would know it and be pulled under. And then I have it was a real visceral feeling of being pulled under, being with these beings, and then coming back up out of that inner dimension. And then simultaneously, I started having visitations in my bedroom by other beings, grays, brown hooded beings, light beings, all of that. And was taken on board craft. And even as a child, I knew there was some kind of connection between what was happening to me underground and what was happening to me in the craft. Like they weren't separated, but they were the same thing and they were communicating and that they were sort of a collaborative effort at this point. And then with that, I was raised in a religious household and I knew Jesus came to our house. My mother had this book that she read to us. It said, if Jesus came to my house, I remember being little and I said to her, oh, why are you reading this book? Jesus comes to our house. Like, we don't really need this book. And so I was always very, very much in touch with spiritual beings also. And on board craft, I had a teacher on board craft who I think probably was a tall white, was masculine figure, was my mentor. I received a lot of symbols and downloads with that. And then also I was able to navigate and power the craft with my consciousness. So I was given sort of like this 101 introduction to physics and craft propulsion and consciousness. And then into in my 40s, I moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And for the first time in my life, I was in an experiencer group just outside of Phoenix in a little town called Fountain Hills, Arizona. And the woman that ran the experiencer group was actually connected to John Mack. She and Leo Sprinkle and John Mack were running the peer group. And they were trying to figure out, what do we do with experiencers? How do we talk to them? How do we understand them? And she was reporting back and forth and to John and to Leo Sprinkle and to the group there of Harvard that was gathered. And so I was able to kind of plug into that knowledge center through her. Her name was Dr. Ruth Hover. But during that time, I went through a big upgrade, I guess, in consciousness about what had happened during my childhood. For example, I was shown symbols on board the craft as a child. And then as an adult, I would be awakened by these, plasma-like orbs in my bedroom. There was a lot of orb activity and they would wake me up. They would kind of come into my ear and sound like a dolphin, make enough to wake me up. I would wake up and I would look up at the ceiling and I had lived in one of those houses with like a popcorn ceiling. This is like icky, but the popcorn ceiling was up there and they would push these symbols down at me, like a 3D push down to me and say, remember this symbol and then other symbols, remember these symbols. So it was like they were taking what I learned unconsciously somewhat as a child and then trying to get me to like plug back into what that communication system was. I also at that time had a vivid experience with an angelic being that came into my home. And that was, like you said, Michael, that was angelic and very ethereal. And she was so big and so bright that I was used to beings around me, like mantis beings. Grays or tall whites. I was used to all this whole panorama of beings. When this angelic light being came in, it was almost too much for my physical sensory array to accommodate. That made a great impression on me. And so during that time was when I came up with the concept of exoconsciousness that I've carried on today. Exoconscious being the innate human experience to connect, communicate, and co-create with extraterrestrials, multidimensionals, interdimensionals, and spiritual beings. We also work with elementals, nature beings, which I think is becoming more and more important today as these earth changes happen. It's interesting. We had an earth an earth change person recently on our Exoconscious Humans YouTube, and he was talking about how now he studies something called earth circles, and he was sharing how now we've identified 4 poles. So we have a north and a south pole, but we also have a pole in the Indian Ocean that's opening up, a magnetic pole in the Indian Ocean, and a magnetic pole that's opening up in the Atlantic Ocean. So this is causing humans to become very quickly multidimensional, because of the galactic currents coming in, and to have a different way that if you're not multidimensional, then I think it would be more difficult to be on this planet at this time as we shift into these galactic currents, solar flares. The Earth itself is holding these different polarities that it's no longer a polarity. It's no longer north and south. The animals and the elementals are certainly, dealing with these shifts also. We need to be more in touch with nature, through our extraterrestrial multidimensional contact and through our angelic contact, because we're all going through this together on this planet.
You've brought up so many different kinds of things. We won't have time to cover them all, but we'll come back and do more along these lines, exploring each one of them ideally. And I should say too, this is a whole new phase for Beyond Being Human. And just to give you the genesis of the project from me, as I mentioned, it came from an angelic encounter. And I had some experiences in my youth in terms of telepathy, and I'd seen ghouls, would you believe, a couple of times, and various other mythological figures like a griffin, things like that. But I was doing a self-development workshop and had been doing that for a year or more, and was just sitting in a room with one other person in front of me doing a question and answer kind of thing. And suddenly all of my chakras, starting with my crown, just started expanding, and the energy transfer was really, really immense. And it spread throughout my entire body. And it was like, what is going on? And I just, wow. And I looked down at my hand at one point thinking, I might be able to see this energy flowing through. I couldn't actually, but as I looked down at my side, it was like, wings? What? Wings? and as I came back to look at the person, like, what are you seeing? She'd gone. The room had kind of changed in my perception. It sort of had my memory's beginning to fade, but a little bit of a spherical aspect to it. But the weirdest thing was I was able to see behind me the angel, tall, very masculine, big muscles, very stern face. I seem to remember slightly longish hair. It's a bit vague. But I remember his eyes in particular, like, just really focused and full on, and like, there was no conversation or telepathy as such at that point. It was very much like, we're doing work here, just soak it in and kind of thing. And the pressure built in waves, and I just had to learn to relax because I was getting teary at different times too from the actual pressure. And it's like, okay, breathe, just relax. I couldn't think about anything else. Didn't think of any questions, or like, okay, I just got to handle this and what's going on. Anyway, after a while, I don't know how long exactly, but it faded down or just subsided. And the person in front of me reappeared and was, what did you see? Absolutely nothing. It was like I'd just been taken out of that reality and popped back in, and life went on. It blew my mind. So I'd never really thought about it before, but like, angel wings are a real thing. And when we relate to paintings from centuries ago. Now it makes sense. The most profound thing for me was being in such a close proximity and feeling that energy, as you say, like totally overwhelming of the senses. All doubt just vanished. Like, okay, yeah, God, the angels, what else? Yeah, it's all right there with us. And yeah. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I went on a search after talking with Mary Rodwell, in fact, who I'd only met a week or two before that happened. Coincidence, maybe? She said, well, maybe stay open to the idea that it could have been an extraterrestrial, it could have been an angel. And that question sent me round and round in circles, like looking for answers and whatever. I have come to believe 100% that it was angelic, because now I know people such as yourself who experience a lot of extraterrestrial interactions and things, and they tend to get those kinds of things showing up where I don't. I get much more sort of, I guess, angelic and Christ consciousness kinds of influences and things coming to me in the people that I meet and the synchronicities and all sorts of different things. As time's gone on, because that happened about 6-7 years ago. Well, firstly, about a month after doing a whole lot of research on YouTube and reading books and talking to a few people like Mary Rodwell, really, really stretched my brain because I didn't know anything really. I'd seen UFOs and that was great, but it, was a little bit remote. About a month later, after diving very deep, very fast, I felt that presence again, that sort of energy buzz kind of thing. And I was just in my bedroom, walking to my office very close, and felt to stop and listen. I couldn't see any particular being, but the presence definitely felt like it was there. And I was in my mind's eye, I guess, given what I remember now is sort of like a sphere, like a download, whatever you want to call it, with the words beyond being human. It's like, what? Beyond being, yeah. And okay, well, what's that mean? And nothing much came at that particular time other than obviously something had been transmitted. And then now over time, maybe I'm just extremely thick, which is, quite possible, but it's all just sort of been unrolling very slowly and steadily and meeting all of these different kinds of people. And like the message and the mission is now very, very clear to me, and it has taken over my life. Before we go on further, let me show some screen of the website just so that it's on record. That's the homepage. This is a recent new image. So there we are. This page here has everyone's bio. This is just one of many pages from a number of different events that we've held. That's the membership page. If you would like to join us, I would love it if you did. And I've got a special happening at the moment, $150 US, but you can read all about that here. And these are just some of the things that have been happening over the last few months. And on Dono here, new light language activations. and we're launching University Galacticus with Brian Rue. Also want to give a shout out to Supernal Magazine. I'm going to start doing videos as well. I've written 2 articles. One talks about the angelic encounter. Any questions from you guys about any of that?
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful website.
Thank you. And this particular section goes through our 12 main themes.
Powerful.
Well, I also should mention that the color image backgrounds that I use are by a photographer, an unusual photographer. His name's George Laraki, and he uses prismatic light in creating these photos. So all of this color background stuff is his, and I've done these montages.
I just want to add that I thought the divine feminine that you brought out in your website's beautiful. All the birthing and women. And it's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's very important.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. This whole thing about relationships started a couple of years ago. It's taken me quite a while to come to grips with it, but more recently, I have been told various stories that were alarming to me anyway, that many people are having trouble with their relationships because of their experiences or their beliefs. But even for myself, talking to people about UFOs, even just a simple thing like that. Well, it's not simple, but you know what I mean. It can cause people just to turn away and like, oh, I just don't want to talk to you, you know, all of that sort of thing. So I think that's changing now with disclosure rolling out. And it felt to me that by discussing more of these multidimensional beings and the experiences that people have, because making it more familiar will help lessen the impact of like, oh, that's unbelievable and all of that. It's like, well, yeah, but there's so many people now who are relating these stories and have done for decades, but we haven't been listening really. Let me read our intro on this particular section. So, alarming stories of relationships being adversely affected by experiences in non-physical realms are increasingly coming to light. For instance, ET incursions, paranormal visitations, past life memories even, phantom pregnancies, i.e. the hybrid breeding program, which is very controversial in its own right, sudden spiritual awakenings, as well as our supernatural gifts such as telepathy and healing, and Rebecca and Darlene in particular exploring all of that in the Exo Consciousness Institute. And so right now with Beyond Being Human, we aim to raise awareness of these realms and increase tolerance and understanding, especially in our relationships, but also in wider society. Even though the ridicule and misunderstanding has lessened in recent times due to disclosure, the need arises to normalize such experience and support the experiences who may be dealing with trauma even. And so I'll just open it up. I mean, anybody want to jump in there just to discuss that premise to begin with?
I'll start that one because it's kind of near and dear to me, because I spent most of my married life shielding that side of myself from my husband because I was afraid that if I spoke up and shared that with him, he would run for the hills because he was already not really in the church. So he wasn't really connected with any of the spiritual aspect of himself, right? And for me to come out in that way would totally push him away. At least that's what I thought. And that was the fear that I operated under for a very long time. So I shielded that from him, although I never shielded it from my children. I was completely open with them. I always validated anything that they saw. And so I've kind of, brought them along with me as I've evolved in a sense. But for him, it was kind of like I shut him completely out. And so when I decided to step into my truth, I realized that not only did I have to, own it within myself, but I had to come out to him. I had to tell him, I had to own it in my relationship with him. And so I did. I sat him down and I told him everything, all of my woo-woo experiences from childhood up, everything, fully expecting him to say, well, you know what, that's too much. I'm out. That's that's too much for me. But what actually happened is that he said, we'll figure it out. And when he said, we'll figure it out, there was some aspect of me that knew we weren't together by accident, that it was divinely aligned, divinely designed, that this was how it should go. And so as I've gone about this relationship and as I stepped into fully, being public with who and what I am, well, I've realized that the more I anchor in my authenticity, the more it brings the people who are supposed to be present to the table. And it gives them the safe space to do what it is that they agreed to do before we came into incarnation. I fully accept and know that he serves as an anchor point for myself. He serves as the connecting point into the 3D realm so that I can do what it is that I need to do from a 5D perspective, so that I can be out here doing what it is that I need to do, so that I can be, I call myself on some level a professional channel, because literally that is what I do every day. I sit and I bring through an anchor frequency. That's kind of what I do. And he's fully supporting me in that. So on some plane, on some level, it's kind of like it's by divine design. Where I think relationships go wrong is that things that are uncomfortable, we don't want to face them, right? Things that are uncomfortable, we have a tendency to want to run from them, turn away from them. What I've realized in doing this work, in this, what people term shadow work, which is really just coming into alignment with the truth of who you are, is that you have to have the courage to face what it is that makes you uncomfortable, be willing to sit with it so you can dissolve and dispel the illusion that fear is, and step into the truth of you. There's no other way to come into a state of unified wholeness if you aren't willing to sit with the aspects of you that make you uncomfortable. So you have to have a willingness to sit with what brings you angst, what incites your fear. You have to have a willingness to sit with that. So that's my in a nutshell, my in a nutshell perspective of how this relationship thing works. But it takes a team, and in my camp, in my community group, I have come into so many women who are in relationships with men who don't have a desire to necessarily step into the spiritual space, but who fully support what it is that they do. And you can see it being divinely designed so that you can do the work that you came into this plane to do. So I fully settled into that. For a long time, I had this fear, this subsequent fear that he was going to wake up one day and say, well, this is too much. I agreed to this, but it's still too much. But finally, I had to come to terms with the fact that he's not going anywhere. This is what he agreed to do. So settle in, get in your safe space. You are safe to be safe. This is what you have to tell yourself. It is safe to be safe, and I can do the work that I came here to do. And so I'm fully settled into doing that work now.
The soul contracts thing is a fairly controversial thing too still. Like, many people may not actually believe that they've planned their life and for their soul growth and whatever. Would you, or any of you, like to talk about that a little bit? Um, and I should mention, I was in a discussion with Carolina Grace, who was part of our flight crew last night, and she brought this up. Like, the relationship splitting may simply be part of that plan. And like, yes, that the time for that learning with that person is over, and that's okay. You know, anyone care to chime in on that?
For me, it's about secrets. So in working with, for whoever is expanding and becoming all that they can be, right? If they have any secrets that they're not sharing with that affects your energy field. It affects your relationships. It affects your health. It's like poison within, right? Because you're leading two different lives. And it's about coming out to that in the risk or the challenge or the possibility of what can happen in your relationships, whether that's a marriage relationship or a family or something, to say, this is who I am, because the more we claim who we are, the more we can be who we are. And that just spreads the information. It's like the ripple effect, right? That when we really claim who we are and there are no secrets and we're in a relationship that is willing to hold the space, and talking about divine masculine and feminine, the masculine was always designed to hold the feminine in its creativity. And we're seeing more and more of that. It's the women predominantly that need to come out of the closet to say, this is who I am and this is what I do, and be strong enough in that to, no matter what happens in the relationship, to be strong enough to be settled with that, and to move through that. I find that in working a lot with people with relationships and the mismatches, they see them as why should I stay in this relationship? The marriage is horrible. And whether they're experiencers or not, it's that imbalance that's being brought to the foreground to heal it, to balance it. It's not about the staying together. It's about the reality of creating realness in the relationship. And then you'll see where you fit or you don't. But then you don't judge. Then you don't criticize. Then you don't pit the kids against the mother or the father. It's like how to have that balanced relationship, family relationship, so that we can navigate and move through our life as multidimensional beings without creating karma, without creating hardships, without creating pain and suffering with anybody.
The whole thing too strikes me as like, this session is going to be shown on Unity Week. And so Unity starts with each one of us and creating peace and harmony and in relationships, and then letting it spread to more and more friends and people and society and community, and eventually nations, and the tolerance aspect of just not reacting and allowing people to have their say and tell their truth is so important. And it also comes down to, be kind in that, like just allowing that. And I think possibly sessions such as this and more discussions along these lines will be a somewhat of a help to various people at different kinds of levels. And there is a huge spectrum too of these levels of people revealing their experiences is one thing. Because even for myself, I know in the beginning, I initially told the group of people in that self-development workshop and got blank faces and like, are you crazy? Or, all of that and whatever. So I shut up. and it took me quite a while to start opening up about it and talking to other people. So I would imagine that's the same for everyone, really, in terms of this range of experiences that people are having. Any other general comments about the relationship situations and what can we do to help? And on Dono, we were talking about actually starting up a monthly sharing group. Do you want to talk about what you've been doing in your sharing groups?
I just created a safe space where people have the ability to share their stories, to hear stories. Because what I found in my own experience, it wasn't necessarily a teacher. Like, I don't think any of us need to be taught. We just need to come back into remembrance of who and what it is that we are, right? So to sit and listen to someone's story, which has been my experience, just to hear those stories has sparked something within myself that's brought certain aspects of me back online. And from that place, can I go delve in myself to discover more about me? I haven't necessarily needed a teacher. And so what I did was I created a space wherein people can join, share without fear of judgment or any of that, just their experience, and listen to the experience of others. And why does it serve? It serves because life is a mirror. Life is a mirror to the self. Life is a mirror. Every relationship, every person that you meet is a mirror unto yourself. And this is why the discussion of relationships is so important, because we see sometimes the human tendency is to see yourself in competition with what exists outside of you, which is external to you. But really, there is no competition because there is no other, right? Everything serves as a reflection unto you. So the savvy the savvy person that's awakening gets to a point where they can utilize the projection to see themselves and make adjustments on the internal plane so that it can become reflected on the external plane. This is what shifted for me in my own relationship, because I realized how I was operating in a split state. And you can't create a sense of wholeness. The external world can't come into a state of unified wholeness until you come into a state of unified wholeness on the internal plane that's balancing the masculine and feminine, like Darlene spoke of earlier, bringing yourself into a state of unified wholeness. And so, yeah, this is the value of connecting with a group, connecting with a community, getting yourself around others who are experiencing similar things. It's not so you just have a place to download, although there's an aspect of it, right? But you have to give yourself an opportunity to hear and expand your consciousness by way of listening to other possibilities, because it's from hearing other possibilities that you have an opportunity to see yourself from a different frame of reference. So you may have a new set of questions to ask yourself and delve into yourself, incite your own curiosity so that you can begin to know thyself, right? Yeah.
I just want to tag off of something you said.
Yeah.
The reflection, taking it the next step for experiencers or people. It's like, what type of being are coming to them? Because it's a reflection. What are they trying to say to you? What are their qualities, their aspects of, whether that's something you know about that species or that individual or whatever, or is it written somewhere that you need to discern? Does that resonate with me? So why are they in my life right now? Why did I just have that experience? What qualities are they not the fear level, but the invitation of why are they here for me? Why did I see that? Why did I experience that? Why did I have that dream that something came into the room? And what were they? What were the details of that? It's again, another relationship reflection, but it's on the multidimensional level.
And I know, Rebecca, you've been doing these sorts of sharing and coaching work for many years now. Any experiences that you care to relay? Well,
it's interesting what Darlene just said, because just identifying who you are, why these beings are coming to you. One of the things that happened, I think, is that, and Donna said, she really wasn't ready to talk with her husband about this. And I think that was probably is what you were saying, that, you weren't ready inside you to talk with him, that was really about a subjective feeling that you had inside of you. And I think when we get to the place where we can see experiencers or a contact as an assistance and a support rather than a confusion or a threat. And that takes time. And we also have groups, I'm sure Andona is going to be doing it, and Darlene does it with her groups, I'm sure. But, if you could just take time as a contactee, for example, just to sit with your contact to, as Darlene said, ask yourself some questions, but also meditate and communicate and use a lot of psychic skills, your telepathy, to have a dream journal, meditate, and let that help you in your relationship, because that contact came into that marriage, or that contact came into that partnership and that relationship. It didn't come just to you. It came into you within a partnership, and just using those skills, and also figuring out with your partner, just as a therapist, I do a lot of what's called attachment therapy. And attachment therapy talks a lot about why am I attaching to this person? What inside of me, as Andona said, is mirroring what need in me is being mirrored in my partner. What's that all about? And what do I need to heal maybe in that need, or recognize in that need, or grow and evolve and make manifest in my life something beautiful and a blessing within that need. Maybe it was a fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, shame, guilt, and heal that, knowing that that's also that being, or that spiritual being, especially as Michael's talking about, coming into your life and saying, I'm here, I'm in this relationship, and I'm here to help you heal that, not to scare you, not to frighten you, not to move into a threat scenario of an annihilation of all humanity, but to actually heal you as a divine being. Those abilities require a calm nervous system. Learning how to calm your nervous system, because I don't care who you are. You're a human. You're going to get triggered. Your husband's going to say something to you. Your partner's going to say something to you. It's going to trigger you. That's just what we are. And maybe they don't even mean it, but right away we're like, boom, we just take off like a rocket. And it's that, that maturing and integrating, where we've integrated enough calmness in our life that we don't get triggered as badly anymore. We still get triggered, but not as dramatically. And we don't need to flop into those old fears and really presuppositions, I think. So I would just say, using the contact as a support system and as an assistance, as opposed to seeing it as a threat and a confusion. One of the things we do in our coaching groups is we spend a lot of time in integration, and integrating contact into your life is a significant step that you take. It's not easy. It takes time. It's not an overnight kind of ability. And we all have faults and, fall short and whatever. But I just like to mention, because I think we're going to be running up against a lot of confusion and chaos in terms of our relationships with our faith. Because now there's a lot of talk about, the Elohim, were they bad? Are they good? Nephilim, were they bad? Were they good? Was Jesus an ET? Is this something that I should fear? People see these two stories of Genesis in the Bible. It's very confusing. Are they angels? Are they demons? And that's all out being broadcast in movies and on streaming videos and on podcasts. And people that don't have the least education or experience about an angel or a demon are just flooding the airways with this. And I think it's going to cause a lot of fracture within faith communities, because unfortunately, faith communities 400 years ago allowed science to just say, okay, you take all the learning, you take geology, you take biology, you take chemistry, you take astrophysics, we'll take consciousness. But they didn't do anything with consciousness. except, rerun around a doctrine. And so now I think this is going to be a really a positive healing time for religion as all this begins to splatter literally into their congregation from the media. They're going to have to be looking at what did we do with consciousness and why didn't we say anything about consciousness for 400 years? And what now can we begin to say? And how are we going to address these people? It's not good enough to say, oh, I don't believe in ET if you're the minister or the clergy or the priest or the whatever. Yeah, that's not going to cut it to these people. For we as experiencers, we can look at this the same way we do as in a marriage and say, can we allow this knowledge to come in, this witness knowledge? I mean, without witness knowledge, there'd be no scriptures. So without this witness knowledge, can we allow it to come in, or do we want to keep the door closed? I think it's going to be a time of great healing and advancement for religion if they allow that to happen. Just like in a marriage. Are you going to, and Donna so beautifully said with her husband, I'm here for you. We're going to work it out. What if religion said to all of us, we're here for you. We're going to work it out. What would that look like? That would look amazing. So, Andona, your husband will be the poster boy for that.
See, what you just said it speaks to the importance of connecting with that heart space. Like that's paramount at the moment, right? You can't trust your eyes. This is one of the reasons. Okay, my name is spelled Andena. Looks like Andina, but it's pronounced Andona. And I've gone back and forth with my guidance on this because it can be confusing. But they said it's a reminder that there's more to be seen than meets physical eyes. You have to allow yourself to go deeper. You have to connect with that heart space. This is why being connected with the heart is so important at the moment, because your eyes can be deceiving and your eyes can throw you into a space of fear. But your heart knows. Your heart puts you into the vibrational resonance of what is in reflection with the heart, right? That is your great discerner of truth, is that heart-centered space. You have to be connected with that. The only way that I can say that one can be moved into that space is to see it reflected in another, right? Because when you come in contact with somebody who is exuding and radiating love, we all know what that is. You can't even put an accurate description on it. You just know how it feels. So allowing yourself to settle into that space of healing and feeling into more. The more that exists. When I first began to open up, my first question to my guidance, because I could hear very clearly from my guidance, and I can now, my body responds as they speak. And they would give me names. I would always ask, well, who is speaking? Who is speaking? And they would give me names. And what I figured out is that some of these names would send me into a space of fear based on what I had been taught in the church, what I had heard growing up in the church. And so at some point I said out loud to my guidance, don't give me another name, because these names are sending me into a space of fear. I don't need another name. I don't need to know the names. Let's just feel into it. And what I didn't realize at the time is how I opened myself up to the infiniteness that is, because now I can feel into the energies that present, where someone else may be brought into a state of fear by this reptilian being that's presented with all its massive energy. I can sit with that being on a heart-centered space and connect with them from a heart-centered space and get that in reflection. I don't have to worry about a threat or something else. That's not even a thought in my mind, because I'm connecting from that heart-centered space. This is why that is so important. But the only way to bring others into alignment with that is to live it, to be it, to allow that flame that is us to ignite that in the people around us.
And that is contagious.
It is.
It is, because you don't have anything to rub against. If somebody's in their heartfelt space and they're being real with who they are, you can do whatever, the other person can do whatever they feel like they need to do, but that person can just stay centered and be with them and address them and hold the space for them if that's important. So yeah, the heart, I think we're all trying to come to that heart space, right? In a more unified way.
And Darlene, would you like to talk a bit more about your work in counselling and possibly about relationships and ETs and things? Any, obviously not sharing names, but any particular stories that illustrate what we're talking about?
Well, relationships are big. I mean, whether it's the relationship with your guidance system, whether it's the relationship with your family and your children, whether it's the relationship even with your body. I did a podcast about the truth of your body has a different belief system than what you do. And that's like a really important place for me as a medical intuitive, that if you've had fracturing, if you've had invasive surgery or abuse or anything as a child or any time in your life, if anything has happened, the body tends to go within and it doesn't communicate, right? Or it tries to communicate, but how the body communicates is usually with symptoms, and then illness, and then disease if you still don't listen to it, right? So developing that relational place using your guidance system and your innate wisdom to come to a deeper understanding so you're more integrated. Like that place of integration. I just went through an integration process for the last 4 months with the evolves. And my idea of integration, they were taking my incarnations. There were 7 incarnations they're pulling those together so that I would see their evolution. I would see how they died. I would see how it got carried into the next lifetime. It was very big and intense. But what they said is, oh, you're looking at integration as bringing all these timelines together. We look at integration as first it's information, and then it turns to knowledge, and then it turns to wisdom. So for them, it's that energetic template of bringing everything in, not through who I was in these incarnations, but what did I learn? Where's my knowledge base? And is that heading into a wisdom space? You know, so people out there today are confused. They're in chaos. They don't know how to be discerning. And if they do know how to be discerning, in some way they doubt it, you know, because there's so much information that's out there that we are trying to navigate. And it's, you know, we're not even at the brink of this going over the mountain yet. You know, we're still building up momentum. And so there's going to be more coming. So how do we stabilize? Who do we talk to? How do we stabilize? How do we take care of our physical body? Because if this physical body goes kaput, so do other things, right? So you really need to take care of structuring this body in some way, to pay attention to it, have a relationship with it, own it in some way so that you can move ahead. And then other things seem to come. It's when we're divided from our physical body that I notice you get more distant from it, right? You get more distant from it. Things start to happen. You start to get fearful, and then you're on a whole other trajectory. So relationship to the body, I think, is utmost important. And then I would go to the relationship with the body, your relationship with your guidance system, and then your relationship with your partner, because those both support the partnership. So sorry, guys, you know, you're not number one all the time.
We've covered quite a lot of ground. I think it's going to be a very interesting time now where disclosure is creeping its way into mainstream, and I think the numbers are going up in terms of people now believing that at least UFOs exist, and then the step going further, like, well, who's flying those UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, flying saucers? In a way, our collective mission is this educational process of like, well, I know about these particular beings and other people, and what we're doing with University Galacticus is to sort of create a bit of a structure around that education. as well. But I think the sharing groups and like your sharing groups, Rebecca, too. I mean, what's come out of that for you or for other people, and any sort of noticeable impacts in society from that?
So about, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I just got the message that I should start group coaching because I had been a therapist and I had been like a one-on-one coach, and I just got the message it's time to do group coaching. And so I just kind of formed a group and did it. And it's been a real learning curve for me. One of the things that was always important to me is having been 20 plus years into the disclosure community, living in Washington, D.C., and, you know, being around kind of the movers and the shakers of the government disclosure community, I knew that a big issue for them was confirmation. Like, is this true? Is this not true? You know, how do we prove this? And so for me, as my emphasis on exo consciousness and experiencers, I knew that the confirmation would be, so you had contact, so we're an experiencer. What are you going to do with it? So a lot of times, as Andona said, you know, stories are very important. They help us refine our identity. They help us in self-understanding and integration. And also, how do we move into create that place of co-creation? For example, as what Darlene's doing with the beings that she's working with. So they're, in a sense, sounds, Darlene, like, I don't want to speak for you, but maybe like they're co-creating you in a sense. Having worked with the astronaut, Dr. Mitchell, I had worked a lot with people that were inventing zero. We were working with 0-point energy, consciousness, and the extraterrestrial presence, knowing that it was kind of a trinity. You had to have all three of those pieces in place in order to really understand these new energies that were going to be here on Earth that we're going to be using. If you leave out the extraterrestrial presence or you leave out consciousness, you're really not going to get the energy. You're not going to get the physics. For me, I always had an emphasis and brought it into my coaching. What are you going to create with your beings? What are you going to receive downloads in? What kind of applications are you going to bring forward to yourself, to your community, to the world, to science, to technology, to health, to psychology, all of that? What are you the co-creator of? That's a major piece that's coming out of our work in exoconscious coaching. I would say the second piece is that Kevin Briggs channels the Council of Eight. And I had known Kevin because years ago, he brought a message to me when I was living in Washington, D.C., and Dr. Mitchell had passed away. And Kevin brought me a message, and the message from Edgar Mitchell was, get out of D.C. It's not good for you. You're going to get sick. And so, you know, my husband and I, we were already in the process of like, this, we don't belong here anymore. Let's go. You know, maybe we come back in another time, but, you know, this time and this work has ended. So I moved, so I'd always been in touch with Kevin, this Council of Eight. And then Kevin 2 years ago joined our coaching. And one thing as a parent, you really learn that things take time. Things take time. I know we all like to think, oh, you know, I had this experience and things just miraculously changed overnight. Well, no, they don't really. It takes time. You're in the human body. Like Darlene said, you have to respect your body transitioning through this. As Andona said, allow people to give them space to talk and to listen and kind of have that kind of chemical, psychological, emotional interaction going on. And it's just been amazing. So Kevin comes in with this Council of Eight, keeps talking about it every time we meet. And then all of a sudden, so this coaching group's been together for 2 years now. People in the coaching group start getting messages from Council of Eight. One woman, Aurora, she starts drawing their pictures. I mean, she's putting them up on Facebook if you ever see them. People love them. They're connecting with the Council of Eight through Aurora's pictures. Karen McLeod becomes the archivist for Kevin and starts like saying, Kevin, you know, you made a mistake here because you were in trance. This is actually what you said. And, you know, you have to be accountable for it. And it has just been, people are inventing all these amazing things. They're getting downloads. They're connecting. Just in terms of the co-creation work, one woman in the group, she has drawing classes for experiencers. People are just loving it. and people that never had drawn in their life go to our classes and start drawing. And that's just one, just basic application. Another of our groups in Australia, and he's kind of one of these kind of garage tinkerers. And I mean, he's inventing all these physics and water things. And it's just amazing. And after Dr. Mitchell died and I left contract, I knew in my heart, if 0 point energy comes in to the world and we have it as an application, it's going to come from ground rooted humans. It's not going to come out of the government. It's not going to come out of Lockheed Martin. It's not going to come out of Raytheon. It's going to come out of exoconscious contactees, humans. And we're going to bring that forth. And we have to be responsible for that. And we have to support our community being responsible for that. So I would say this is a freaking exciting time.
Absolutely, yeah. And I should mention that a while ago, 2022, in fact, Kathleen Martin, Kevin Briggs, and Denise Stoner and Dr. Melanie Barton, we held a conversation about that. Yeah, the whole Council of Eight thing I'm hoping to include in the documentary. And we've even discussed about, well, what's it take to actually capture some of the entities and whatever. And they were talking like they've previously tried and the cameras blew up or you just wouldn't work or, something would always go wrong. So we're actually going to be working well in advance. This is what we discussed at the time. We're going to let them know what's going on with the documentary. We're going to ease them into the idea and hopefully invite them to participate. And yeah, and we'll see how we go. Watch this space. Wanted to also introduce Ondina's light language work and let you know that on our YouTube channel and her YouTube channel, there is a playlist, and she's been doing great work. And I probably don't thank you enough.
In this moment, on the heels of the breath, we invite you to move into the space of the heart.
Anyway, they're all there. And also let me introduce Rebecca's website, exoconsciousness.com, where you can book sessions and find out all about that. And actually, just popping back to you again, Rebecca, typically people might have interactions with extraterrestrials and they'll come back and report that their healing powers have suddenly appeared and that they're getting much more telepathic messages and things like that. You want to just talk a little bit about that, please?
Actually, looking at the group and just kind of holding them in my mind right now, quite a few of them opened their healing abilities when they were telepathically told to go to learn Reiki. That just ignited them and their healing powers. Another is you kind of described your spiritual experience kind of similar to a Kundalini experience. So I don't want to put definitions on what you were saying. But I think that the Kundalini experience happens to people. That also is kind of an initiatory. What we're really talking about here is initiation. I mean, that's kind of an old mystery school term that we're all learning about mystery schools now for sure. But probably now and in the past lives. Yeah, that's kind of something that ignites people. It's interesting. Some people don't even know they've been ignited. Until they're like, I just knew I should come here or, whatever. And then after they're there, some people get ignited. For example, Karen McLeod, she kept finding all these rocks, like triangle rocks. And so nature was talking to her and awakening her. And so that was a very common thing also. A lot of people in the group initially have orb activity, which is very interesting. So we've been exploring what plasma science is. I would say to people listening to this, I think plasma science is something that we're going to be learning more about as humans, which once again, plasma science 400 years ago was taken out of science. It was called the ethers. It was removed from science. And now it's coming back in, thankfully, because it has a whole spiritual, self-assembling, responsive intelligence to it that science can identify and work with. So a lot of orb activity. And some people like Darlene, I know Darlene's family was very active, and some people came in through their parents, through their mothers, mostly came in through their mothers. And maybe Darlene would want to talk about that, but that's a very powerful thing to have, a gift for your life.
I just wanted to say that, talking about co-creativity, it's a big deal because we've lost our creativity and, through circumstances, through trauma, through whatever, right? What I've been seeing with how the evolves are working, or the multidimensionals that I work with, because I very much work like Undana. I can never get names right. It's broader than that. Like there isn't one particular group or anything. When you work in that whoever shows up, shows up. And what's been happening is in past lives or a timeline that you've experienced in another incarnation, they are starting to integrate, or they're starting to cross over into our timeline. So they are showing me how to change the timeline. So it's like living in two worlds, because what's happening, you get information about who you were and where you were going and all of that. And then you do whatever you need to do to harmonize that, heal it. And then it stops. And then something in our timeline, present day, changes. And then it swings back in, and then you go to the other side again and you heal something again and it comes back in. So it's like being on this trajectory where you're running two timelines, sometimes three at a time, because they all have the same kind of relationship, but you're healing each one. And as you're healing it, present day changes. It's a really fascinating thing for me to watch how that works with people, because I'll say, well, we need to stop here because something needs to happen where you are, in this lifetime. And within 3 days, something changes. And then they can go back in again. It's learning how to manage and navigate, bringing timelines together to heal all of them in whatever way that is being given to you to heal. It's a real big co-creative process, but I think that's what they want. They want us to co-create with them. They don't just want us to sit there and go, oh, I'm not a creator. I don't know what to do. No, they want the interaction. They need the interaction. They evolve because of our interaction. Yes. They can't get rid of us.
Absolutely.
And we can't get rid of them.
Well, I think it's time to kind of wrap up again. And like I asked before on Donor, are you up for a little bit of light language just to...
Oh, always.
And I've got to say too, thank you so much for being part of this. And like I said, it's also just the start of a new kind of process for Beyond Being Human, whereas previously I was doing research, but this now has more of a society focus. Like, how can we help? What usefulness is the research? Rather than just telling people all of this. So we're going to start creating more community events and gatherings and things. And that's what the membership's all about as well. I love that photo, by the way. And
oh, nice. I do too. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And there's an index of all of the different publications, light activations, meditative activations. And thanks so much for doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting it. So I'm just going to invite everybody to take a deep breath and settle in that heart space. Envision yourself as anchored between the central sun and the crystalline core of Mother Gaia herself. And as you settle within that heart space, allow yourself to have an openness to receive.
Metkai sotramati ani shore an veru siendrave omirak ande ashod. Hero sume ore ande ashad. Veru kean hieras. Meraka inda shotre me ad. Heveru an hieru kama asuad. Vera huad. Veru kama herat dusand. Oran rean. Ferran dean. Pero ashan deo dean merakaisia tu kara sud vera suad viruk asand merakaisia tu kande aso verand esho de and verand eshan ashe ashe. And take a breath. Ashe. Thank you.
Thank you. Mm. And glory to the light of the radiant one, as Dr. Celestine Starr would say. Yeah. But it reminded me just then too, in my youth, I spent a little bit of time in a charismatic church where everyone was speaking in tongues. Is there any relationship, do you think, with light
I
language?
think there is. I think it's all the same. It's just an unconscious version of it's just an unconscious version, but we're all conduits and can be used by the all in any given moment, right? We're all conduits for the divine, right? I think that speaking in tongues, that sporadic, the way it comes up spontaneously, it's just an unconscious version of what I do consciously, what many of those like myself do consciously. And so it can come out in any form and many of the different dialects that exist. But it all works. It's all frequent. It's all of the divine. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it was interesting listening to you because I listened to some of your recording before knowing that I was going to meet you.
Okay. Okay.
There's hand movements. Like when you were doing that, there was sweeping. I felt like I just wanted to move in it. You know, like very choreographed, but free flow. You know, it was pretty powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you. And that's how I feel. And I feel myself moving in that way. So when I go outside, which I've started back doing, I start doing Qigong, which turns into ladder hand, which is that involuntary movement that happens. I do that every day. It's my communion with nature. So yeah, there are currents. There are those unseen currents. You talked about the ether, and it all flows. There is no empty space, right? So we're just allowing the self to feel into all of it. Yeah.
Well, look, I was just thinking, I'm so incredibly blessed by all of the people who have been involved, and just almost from the first time that I just started talking about, like, well, I've had this angelic experience, and it feels like there's a mission of education wanting to come forth, and I've got this page here as an ending sort of thing. So if people want to get involved and be doing sharing groups and presenting or having conversations or just being interviewed, then feel free to reach out, and you can find me very easily on the website. There's a contact page. Let's get this party happening. And thank you so much. I think we'll wrap it up at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.